Hood Scholarship.
What if I told you in the 6th century BCE, during the Neo-Babylonian Empire, the Hebrew canon went through a major makeover that copy and pasted the term Yahweh over older Elohim stories, giving off the illusion that the Hebrew text was always of a monotheistic belief. Now, what the 6th century BCE editors of the Hebrew canon forgot to account for was the plural pronoun usage accompanied with their singular God. Two plural pronouns, us and our, are used 7 separate times in 4 separate passages in some of the most pivotal times of the text that refer to a singular God, followed by plural pronouns. The first account of a plural pronoun being used when referring to a quote-unquote God is found in Genesis 1:26 in the creation of man, when apparently God is talking to himself, telling himself,
"And said God, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness."
So who is us and ours? Well, when looking at the Hebrew text, we see the term used there is Elohim instead of God. And knowing from previous discussions that Elohim is a plural noun, it makes sense that it's followed by plural pronouns, keeping in compliance with the laws of the language and further signifying that Elohim does not mean one, but multiple. And yet again, in Genesis 3:22, in the story of the garden, we have more plural usage with the term God. However, when we look in the Hebrew, it states,
"And said Yahweh, Elohim, behold, the man has become like one of us."
Here we see both terms, Yahweh and Elohim, but we know Yahweh is a singular entity, so why is plural pronouns being used with the singular Yahweh? Well, here's where the breadcrumbs lead to the 6th century redaction of the Bible and the copying and pasting of Yahweh, the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, over older Elohim stories. In Genesis 11:7, in the story of the Tower of Babel, when God goes down to confuse the language of man, we find another plural pronoun being used. But to keep it in context, let's go back one verse in the Hebrew text to see for ourselves that Yahweh is who these plural pronouns are attributed to. And when the text says,
"Come, let us go down and confuse their language,"
showing us yet another example of the 6th century redactors and their attempt to change the Hebrew text from polytheistic to monotheistic by covering older Elohim stories with the holy name of Yahweh. As stated previously, Yahweh himself claims to have only become the Elohim of Israel at around the time of Abraham, and Abraham's father, Terah, served other Elohim. And realizing Terah didn't know Yahweh, and it's assumed neither did his ancestors because they served other Elohim, then the story starts to come into focus, and we see the significance of Yahweh accompanied with plural pronouns prior to the time of Abraham, thus signifying that the holy name of Yahweh was pasted over stories of the Elohim.
Hood Scholarship. This is not your average podcast.